But anyway, it is already 7:01 to everybody. And I think it is time to let this meeting begin. Mr. Vice Chair, would you lead us in the meeting?
So yes, Martin, I was actually so just in the past we've noticed that folks join within the first 4 minutes or so. So actually, before we get started and before I start introducing Dr. Ana Perez, wondering if folks could help me just messaging someone that that maybe should be here. Send them the link. Who knows? You may be able to bring them in. I'm sending it to two groups. And thank you, Francis, for actually transitioning us to a way to maybe finish this the starting of this meeting, which is just to get to know each other, start creating that safe space. Dr. Anna, you heard your audience today, we're ready. But I kind of wanted to know from you all, do you celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day and where, or tell me about it?
Wow, everybody's quiet. Well, I worked that day and I followed everybody through I actually did see UTA's deal that they had for Indigenous Peoples Day, and I enjoyed what I got to see when they went live. And I don't know, were you there or were you sick, Rojo?
I was not sick, thankfully. It was Steven, unfortunately, that he was a bit sick and he couldn't attend that day. But he worked really hard to set up that event, and we're very thankful. It went really well. I'm nervous because next year I get to organize it with folks since a lot of our chair is graduating this year. So I'm a little nervous. I'm also helping with the powwow, and I would love to mention more about that at the end of the call, so folks can put it on their calendar because we have set a set date for the UTA powwow. And if folks don't know this yet, we're actually working on making it bigger because as of right now, we're the largest powwow in Texas. So I'm very excited to try to keep pushing for it, and grow the community. How about y'all, folks? Where do you spend Indigenous Peoples Day? Anyone else working that day?
We
Now that you
actually
mention,
have,
oh,
yeah. Oh no, you go, you go.
no. I was going to ask Rojo since he did say put it on your calendar, but he didn't give us a date.
I was gonna mention at the end because I'm actually joining. My computer wasn't connecting to internet, so I'm on my phone. But let me gather the date, and I'll also send the graphic or the dates on Facebook and Slack. Go ahead, Danielle. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, there was multiple events around the city in San Antonio, but I went to the Brackenridge Park Indigenous Peoples Day celebration because they were also holding workshops and having different speakers talk upon like the really pressing issue, saving the park and the sacred site that's there. So with what we know from research that's already been done, it's been determined that there is an indigenous origin story with the Lipan Apache and the Carrizo tribe, and I think it's the Panaqua. I don't want to mispronounce it. I've got to check how to pronounce that. But the blue hole or the Ojo de Agua in San Antonio, it's actually known in native knowledge that that site is the site that birthed a lot of the springs and rivers in the entire state. So there's a really big fight right now to preserve that spring, like that site, because for 2,000 plus years, the native birds that have been nesting there and the migratory birds that have been going through that space in Brackenridge Park are being threatened right now because the city wants to dismantle the wall and the trees that have been there. And if that would get lost, we don't know what would happen to the species. Modern day is known as the egret, but the egret is actually in the origin lore of the spring, the bird that actually carried the water on its wings. And when it dropped the waters by the issue of, who you would call, Mother Earth, Mother Nature, the drops from the bird's wings were San Antonio River Rio Grande River, all the Nueces River, all the water bodies that everybody knows today. So that was basically the education that was offered that day in the park. And I believe they have a petition. And I believe the tribe that I was mentioning, that I need to check how to pronounce it, they have media going on. Also, there's like a grassroots media source, Deceleration. It's like totally like grassroots powered. And if anybody's interested in that, like, yeah, they're looking for people to sign the petition. They're looking for people to spread the word. Also, it's part of a large lawsuit. The religion, the lawyers for religion and religious freedoms at UT Austin, some of the law students and their law office are part of helping the tribes with this lawsuit. So if it would get passed in the state of Texas and we could actually like see the prevention of the damage of the trees and the spring, then it could be used as a defense for other tribes around the state who are looking to protect other sacred sites. So this could probably be really big help for Corpus Christi, Coastal Bend tribes, and also the Boca Chica in the valley and what they do to the river and what they do in El Paso. And so I'm actually gonna like double check the name because I should get this name right. But
Danielle,
yeah, that's what I did.
I sent
Yeah.
you a link on the chat. Let me know if maybe that corresponds to my job data land acknowledgement from Bear County. So I wanted to confirm those are right. The research they did, apparently they asked an indigenous folk that goes to UTSA. Apparently, like one of the organizers, that's where they got their research. So it would be helpful to kind of just confirm that. I am gonna go ahead and introduce our speaker for the night. And if folks want to go ahead and share something else, please, I encourage you to do so in the chat. And also tell us what land, what territory or ancestral land you're calling from today. Me, for example, today, I'm about to find out which one. You all know we have that link, thankfully open, that shares what land we stand on. Currently, I'm in Washington, D.C., so I'll find out who what land I'm standing on. It's helpful to sometimes acknowledge, because as you all know, we first acknowledge and then we look into healing, reparation, and justice. So with that said, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce our speaker now. So now, I will be honest, this is an extensive resume, Dr. Anna, so I'm gonna make some highlights, okay? But to, absolutely, no, folks, this is good. So here's where I'm starting. So for the education of Dr. Ana Perez, we have someone that attended the University of New Mexico for doctorate. And prior to that, she was part of Texas Christian University, located in Fort Worth, just 10 minutes away from where I stay. He was a business major, then elementary education and bachelor's, and then for the master's, special education, and doctorate of education and education administration at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. For the positions, currently serving, or not currently, I'm sorry, the most recent one was Isleta Independent School District in the around the areas of El Paso. Before that, helping with the Independent School District in several positions. And what I would love to highlight for y'all that I saw here is co-authored 3 books and numerous articles in educational field, which please, Dr. Anna, make sure you share it on Facebook so that folks can read this too. And then for the honors award, right? We have the Hall of Fame from El Paso Commission for Women. We have Administrator of the Year from the state of New Mexico, Outstanding Dissertation from the University of New Mexico. And I think you placed it at last, which honestly, I think, I hold this dearly, the Community Volunteer Work, right? A Commissioner for Housing Authority of the City of El Paso, member of Board of Managers from El Paso County, and Isleta Educator Foundation, Isleta del Sur Pueblo Higher Education. I think through this resume and what I've shared, you see the commitment to education and the commitment to improving the quality of living and education for our people and for all people. So with that, if you can please go off mute and help me welcome Dr. Ana Perez. Woo!
Thank you. I'd like to start with a quote from Kent Newburn from the book, The Wisdom of the Native Americans. The spirit of the native people, the first people, has never died. It lives in the rocks and the forest, the rivers and the mountains. It murmurs in the brooks and whispers in the trees. The hearts of these people were formed of the earth that we now walk, and their voice can never be silenced. Our topic for tonight is orgullo. And one of the greatest influencers is the spoken word. And since my Tigua culture is oral tradition, this presentation will be oral. But I'd be glad to share anything in the future if you have any questions or would like something. As I stated, the topic is orgullo, pride. And I'll begin with a definition, the meaning, my story, some examples, and conclude with your opportunity to share, to question, to reflect, and then we can close by summarizing some common threads. From the Merriam-Webster dictionary, pride is the quality or state of being proud, such as reasonable self-esteem, confidence, and satisfaction in oneself. Pleasure that comes from some relationship, association, achievement, or possession that is seen as a source of honor, respect, and so forth. And then you have that exaggerated self-esteem, which is conceit, and we don't want that. The second definition is respect and appreciation for oneself and others as members of a grouping, especially a marginalized group. Solidarity with a group based on a shared identity, history, and experience. So what is it? Where does it come from? Are we born with it? I ask you to consider my 3 R's of life, and it's not reading, writing, and arithmetic, but respect, responsibility, and responsiveness. First of all, respect for self, respect for others, responsibility for our own actions, which drives you to take action, which is responsiveness. And that's the foundation. And those are the things of which we can be proud. With fulfillment of responsiveness to others' needs, that gives you pride. Te da orgullo. You feel pride of the accomplishment of others' success and how you're able to help them or to assist them. My father was the nurturer, and he was a great storyteller who weaved interesting stories almost nightly that flourished pride in our roots as he embraced our Tigua culture and our relatives. And as you heard, I was reared in the Southside barrio of Fort Worth, which is far from El Paso and Isleta and the Tigua tribe. But we traveled to El Paso yearly, every year. My full-blooded Tigua grandmother died when I was just 2 months old, so I never knew her. But we visited our tios, our tias and tios in what was then called El Barrio de los Indios in Isleta. We played with our cousins while the adults conversed. They made music, they sang songs, they prepared meals. And my father and mother taught us to greet our elders with respect. Dad proudly introduced us to his primo, Miguel Pedraza, who was the chief, cacique. And as a child, I marveled at the mountains each time we drove to El Paso. Dad's words and behavior, his actions demonstrated, be proud of who you are, your ancestors. And yet at the same time, he would not let us go barefoot because he did not want us to appear as poor. That was his thinking. So he had pride. He told us to help others, be of service to others. Don't let anything or anyone stop you from your goals. You can be or do anything you want. He encouraged risk-taking. I was allowed, for example, to play football with the boys or climb trees with my brothers in the neighborhood, as well as dolls or dress up with the girls. So I learned both sides. And that was rare back then. He taught us to work hard. He showed us, even, my sister and I had to learn how to change a tire and change the oil and to be able to take care of ourselves. But he always said, education is the way, because neither my father nor my mother even finished high school. So Dad's pride in our roots resulted eventually to my spiritual pathway to move to El Paso after 13 years in New Mexico. So I returned to the land of my ancestors to participate more frequently in the activities, the tribal activities, to volunteer, to help, to serve, and eventually to design and build my own home on the reservation. Now, Dad's words of pride also included such things as, the world is our church. You can pray anywhere, even under a tree. And that all people are to be respected, honored, and awarded pride. He proudly stated, softly with humility, we are poor, our people are poor of money, but we are rich with love. Our land in Isleta was taken because taxes couldn't be paid. We were an agricultural tribe. But he also stated, one day in the future, our tribe will be able to help our youth go to college and be able to give money to tribal members. I don't know where that thinking came from. And he did not live to see the day, but his words did ring true. And so his inheritance is fruitful to his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren. And so let me give you some examples from my lifetime. And Francis, I've got you beat because I'll be 80 in July. Service has many facets. And we have to ask ourselves, service to others is the way, again, that I say we should take pride in that with humility. So I say, have I protested? Yes. Have I marched? Yes. Have I spoken up for others? Yes. Have I represented others? Yes. Have I donated? And we have to think of donations as talent, time, not just money. Yes. Have I helped others? Yes. Have I volunteered? Again, talent, time, and yes, whatever money that you can afford. And yet we have to ask ourselves now, where are we? Where do we go? Which direction? I want you to stop and think, what is your orgullo, your pride story? Where did it come from? To share, to reflect, or to ask a question. And you have learned, am short with words and presentations. So it's now your turn.
Folks, if you could join me in thanking her and un aplauso.
But it's an honest question. Give me some examples of your pride and where did it come from?
Thank you, Dr. Anna, so much. And I believe that folks maybe could have a second to think about the question. I'm gonna go ahead and do my best of writing in the chat while folks can answer. Before we start answering the question, if that's okay, Dr. Anna, I wonder if folks want to highlight something from what you just heard or uplift any words of, I will say that for me and Taylor, we just talk about how you give us a lot of energy tonight, Dr. Anna. And just being in this room and hearing from you makes me feel really proud, and I want to just uplift that. And thank you so much for sharing that. But yeah, I want to pass it on to folks if folks would like to uplift, and then maybe go ahead and start answering.
And I would like to say gracias for your words, your encouragement that you brought to all of us. El orgullo que te da for who you are and what we are, because that is very strong. And I took pride in every word that she said. And Daniela, the Rojon, that one that you mentioned about Rijon Apache, actually that's one of mine that I have. That's my tribe right there that you mentioned. Because I looked it up and I go, wait a minute, I've heard that name before, and I looked it up, and that's the one that came from. That's where my indigenous peoples is that one that you mentioned. So, and Ana, Dr. Ana, thank you for todo. I pass it on to Al.
It's it's a different way of looking at things in a way, that the work you do kind of for others is something, a lot of times I think we think about pride as being a negative thing, I mean, not in terms of like, well, even so, like now, even in this country, to be too nationalistic is a negative thing, I mean, it's become not through not through our own fault, but through, people have taken it over. But, just when, you're doing work for other people or trying to help other people, that's not necessary. You can be proud of it. You can be proud of the work, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but to have pride in the work is, it's like it's not about you, so you shouldn't be proud, kind of. But I mean, it's an interesting way to look at it because like I mean, I'm listening to myself talk, and it's like, yeah, you do have pride in the work you do. So
Yes, and that's correct. It has to be with humility, definitely. And we don't carry pride on our shoulders, but we take pride that we are all people of this earth. And that's our responsibility, is to help each other.
If I may, this is Frances. I feel very, very badly sticking my nose into the middle of this because I have for most of my life identified myself as a Chicana, Tejana, the Chicano rights movement, and Viva la Raza, But I do know that I come from indigenous peoples. I know I'm of mixed blood. I also know that in my own family, the two different sides, maternal and paternal, there were prejudices against each other porque se acusaban, no, eres indio, or yo no soy indio, soy español, all that kind of mixed up history. And we have a big job to do in educating our own community because, for example, in the 7th grade of public education in Texas, they start teaching Texas history at the Alamo, okay? They might say, okay, Texas was part of Mexico, but they jump over it. Then they start talking about all those great white heroes at the Alamo that were killed by those dirty Mexicans, okay? So we have a lot of work to do to educate our own people about the real roots of our bloodlines and where we come from, that we're not just in today's world, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to put it this way, but that we're not just Democrats and Republicans or whatever else, but that we're Chicanos or that we're Tejanos or that we're indigenous people or that we're mixed blood. We need to help our people learn what our real history is and where we came from. When I was, I'll give you this history. When I was organizing and training for the Tejas Girl Scout Council, why was the Girl Scout Council called Tejas? Tejas. And it was because of the original Tejas Native American tribes in what we now call Texas. They later on changed the name, okay, because there was so much prejudice against indigenous peoples, and I don't need to get into all that. I'm just saying they've changed their name. Okay, so we know that Tejas was populated by Tejas Indians, okay? So we need to educate ourselves, we need to educate our peoples about where we came from and who we really are, and that we were here before the Spaniards. That's what we need to educate our kids about. Do we have to set up our own educational system? Do we have to set up extra sessions for our young people? What do we need to do?
So
And
I guess
that's exactly why we have Indigenous Peoples Day, is we have at least made one step forward with that. Got rid of Columbus Day. But yes, education is always the way.
I guess Danielle.
So this is really interesting because this is kind of like my whole life's theme. I I can see the heavy work it's going to take to educate everyone on our true history and our true origins. And I think a lot of it has to do sometimes with people have a really big cognitive dissonance. Just to kind of like break that down, you know, when people have been indoctrinated to having a certain ideology or a certain kind of history, it's heartbreaking. You shatter somebody's world when they realize that, you know, we're not all sons and daughters of like Daniel Boone, right? And and as exciting as that sounds, you know, the history of the white settler, I've commented this with like some of my peers, it can be really sexy. It can sound really enticing and really exciting than these swashbuckling heroes and these romantic, over the top, romantic sized pieces of history of how they see the Alamo and how they see the whitewashing of the trauma and the devastation of genocide, land grabbing, mob violence that was performed to make Texas turn to Texas from Tejas Coahuila, original native land that was originally known to 72 plus different tribes as the medicinal gardens. There are people who still travel and pray as far up north as Canada and as far south as Latin America for the peyote gardens in South Texas. So that cognitive dissonance, that's something that's really hard to like grip with. But the people want to know, right? And that's why people fought for, I really believe with Maestra Ana Perez about, you know, that's why we have Indigenous Peoples Day now. And that's why we have those little opportunities of education. And kind of the advice that I give to my students when they get super frustrated, when they see all the work that's kind of ahead of them, is we're like gotas de agua. We're like the little drops of water of the same water bird that made our land, you know? I'm a drop, you're a drop, every piece of wisdom, every bit of opportunity, we're just another drop. But guess what? When everybody unites, we're a big, mighty ocean. ¿Me entiendes? Like we're a big tsunami. And so I just really want everyone to give love to yourself, because the fact that we have these spaces and these platforms today We are the ancestors' dream made flesh. And it may not feel like it because we're like sitting on a Zoom, right? Like, what are we doing? But it's gonna go far and wide because I share part of my education with you. You share part of your education with me. I feel super, super honored. We have Francis and Anna here tonight because I just feel super honored to be blessed with the wisdom that you guys have brought from all this experience. And I just feel really, really, that's my pride. Our shared stories, our shared and intersecting histories, how that will help us endure on the days where it just feels really, really awful, right? Because we also have to acknowledge like this work isn't easy and you can be really tired and be preparing for the week, but you're here right now, sharing your wisdom with the rest of us and sharing the wisdom with each other. And I feel super, super proud about that. And that's the way we can educate the people to share that pride. Because when they catch that spark of pride, um, it's like lighting the fire. It's like lighting the flame with the students and with the people and with the public that they'll want that pride and they'll reach out and they'll do the work. They'll do the work. But also the best way we can do it is just keep sharing because especially in Texas, we don't actually get the open red carpet reception to teach ethnic studies and indigenous history. So yeah, we don't wait for the red carpet reception. We just do the work now. So
That was awesome. How about you, Raul?
Yeah, I was moved by the speech and everything, and it touched home with my family history and the way the way we were taught things and how to serve others and have that servant leadership in your part of your DNA um, and just be proud of who you are and where you came from. You know, in my generation, guys, I was born in '68. Real quick, I'll tell you a quick story. I grew up in Houston, and Spanish was my first speaking language. It was my mother tongue because my mother would only speak to me in Spanish, and so I did not know any English when I went to elementary school. So I failed first grade because I couldn't speak English. But I was one of the few Hispanic uh, students in that part of town. So every time I would speak Spanish, I would get punished, and I would make fun of. They even put a dunce cap on my hat, or sometimes I'd be putting on a stool, to sit on for others to, just to make, I guess, make fun of me or whatever, or made an example of me because I spoke Spanish. And so, and then the other thing too, all throughout school, they changed my name from Raul to Roy. They could not pronounce my name properly. They didn't like my name, so they changed it to Roy. So they were trying to basically take away of who I am, right? My true identity. So when I heard the speech, it just reinforces of being prideful of where you come from, and do not let anyone take that away from you. Yeah, that's just a little bit of insight about me, and I appreciate the speech.
Thank you for
I can imagine how they mentioned the Camacho part.
Yeah, they a lot of times I was made fun of that too, and just a quick story on that one too. Camacho is not my true surname. We after going through DNA ancestry search and all that, it's actually Gonzalez. And so, but we carried the name because that's the name that they gave us, of course. But yeah, it's just really neat, just going back to your roots, and thank God to ancestry.com and to people like you guys who we learn from. I enjoy hearing from people who are older than me, because they bring stories that books can't really tell sometimes. And so I appreciate that.
If I may, this is Francis again. I have 4 grown children, 3 sons and a daughter. All 3 of my sons are Army. We as Latinos, let me put it that way. We as Latinos, Chicanos, we're proud to be U.S. citizens, and our kids are heroes in the military and all the wars. We get they get all the medals and recognitions for being warriors. Okay, so apparently we have a bloodline of warriors, no matter what generation you're talking about. However, in today's world, people in the military are indoctrinated, or in our society in general, are indoctrinated into partisanship. You're either Republican or you're Democrat, or, and few people are independent or whatever. We have our own responsibility to educate our own children. And I'm going to be the first to admit that in spite of all of my entire life as a Chicana activist, not all of my children believe the way I do. Okay. I'm just saying that we have a challenge in our own family units to help them understand what we have been through, what we are continuing to go through, and for them to understand our backgrounds and our history. If we don't teach our kids our history, first of all, we have to know our history. Okay. And we don't always know our history. It's taken me a long time to understand that my bloodline in my life goes back more than the United States of America. Okay. We have to understand that the USA is a very young country, but our lifeline and our peoples go many, many centuries back. If we don't help our children understand this, and this is a challenge that I'm going through right now, is to help my children, my adult children, to understand, and my grandchildren to understand, why am I the person that I am? Why do I believe the way I do? Who am I? Who are they? That's the biggest challenge that we have.
That's exactly right, Francis. And that's why I gave the example and the story of my father, because that was given to us orally. I've done the same thing with my children and my grandchildren now, because that's how we pass it on. We have to share our own stories, our own experiences, and help them to understand where they come from, where we come from. And yes, we're not just Native American. I'm not just Tigua. I'm also a Chicana. When I said I marched, yes, era para la raza. I was in all those organizations. And so the things that we do is, again, it's like a puzzle. There's nothing that is just linear and just is one thing, but our voice is strong. Remember that that's the most influence that you can give is your voice. So whether it be with your immediate family, your community, your friends, your neighbors, yes, we have to speak, we have to share and do our part.
I totally agree. And the other thing too, guys, throughout elementary, middle school, and high school, especially in, I believe in my generation, we were taught that, that basically Anglos were the rulers. They're the best. They conquered and they triumphed, and forget about the Indians and the natives and Hispanics were all losers, and so that took a toll on a huge generation of Latinos in school. And so, and then the ones who were like me that were being punished for speaking Spanish, we were indoctrinated to speak English and change our names. Look at so many movie stars and singers out there that were really good artists back in the 60s and 70s. They had to change their names to English names in order to get recognition. So I blame society as a whole, but more of the school system than anything else, because for years, for over 25, 30 years, we were taught a different way, and so it took me a long time to bring back my, of who I am, you're right, where I come from. Now, I kid you not, you cannot stop me from listening to more cumbias than nobody else. Oh my God, I am so addicted to that stuff, and that's all I listen to. And my son, who's born here, of course, he's like, Dad, you're more Mexican than grandma, he tells me. It's because I'm embracing my heritage. I'm embracing who I am. I'm embracing my culture, and so but a lot of my peers, they went the other way. Ya se creen güeros, you know, and so it is sad and it's hard to change that those people, because again, for 20, 30 years they've been indoctrinated to think differently.
And that definitely is sad when that happens, because they've lost the beauty and of the culture, and it's just a loss.
And I think that's
Yeah.
really, in terms of pride, that's the biggest part of pride, is defining who you are for yourself, and that can change from time to time, but to not let either a government organization or a government or an organization or group that you might want to belong to, or a company or anything else, a neighborhood, a group of friends, define who you are, tell you who you are. I just finished a book on the colonization of America, just in time for Indigenous Peoples Day. And one of the things it pointed out was that actually it wasn't the English who colonized America best. It was the Spanish and the Portuguese, but mostly the Spanish. And that includes up in New England, but in Virginia, I'm trying to remember which, but one of the tribes, it's now a very small tribe, was almost wiped out because of kind of the racist language of the government, that they didn't want to be defined as, so they separated themselves from African Americans who, they probably could have allied with. And people moved away, and to avoid the racism. And now the tribe is trying to build itself back up, but again, that's by letting someone else define you do a lot of damage.
Absolutely.
We haven't heard from Taylor, Clayton, and Kristen.
Clayton, do you want to go before I go?
Hit the right button. I really, to be honest, don't really have a comment on the topic. I'm still sort of exploring my roots on my indigenous side, so I don't really have too much to say on the topic. It's just more learning right now.
Thank you, Clayton. I have a few questions for Rojo and Taylor after I talk about what pride means to me. I am curious about, you guys are talking about speaking Spanish in schools. when I lived in Iran, I noticed that a lot of the kids entering schools spoke Spanish. And I thought it was sad to hear in my kids' classes today that kids still get in trouble or sort of yelled at for speaking Spanish. And I wonder, and I'm directing this at Rojo and Taylor. I wonder if there's something in the Reconciliation Act. I don't think it's really fair that schools can opt out of teaching like a predominant language that, children are entering into school speaking and making them stop speaking it. But I also wonder so we do have, like, to our northern border, we have French and English, and to our southern border, we have Spanish. But I wonder if instead of German, as a part of reconciliation, if an indigenous language could replace German, like a local indigenous language. So like where I'm from, up north in Minnesota, like Anishinaabe or Ojibwe language, like if that could be offered in public schools instead of German, because if you think about our immediate borders, now we do have in Minnesota a lot of German and Scandinavian, as well as immigrants, as well as Somali refugees. But I don't know if in Minnesota, if schools are still to this day like opting out of teaching, I don't know the word for how you'd speak in Somalian language. Is it Somalian? I don't know. But our schools still opting out of teaching languages that children predominantly speak. And is that something that we could stop them from opting out of? As well as maybe the national predominant languages should be French, Spanish, English, as well as like pick a local indigenous language for reconciliation. So I don't know how you'd feel about that, but it got me thinking. It made me think about my experience in Iran, and it was sad because some of my friends up north in Minnesota, their mom is from Bolivia and their dad is from North Dakota. And what I thought was really awesome was how my friend's mom insisted on speaking Spanish to her kids so that they would learn it. And now as adults, they're able to go back and visit their family that's still in Bolivia. And they have like an import business because of that, as well as my friend is also a lawyer now. That helped her get a job being bilingual, where now she's able to represent people who are Spanish speaking. And so I think when in Iran, I felt like it was such a loss of talent. We're talking about talent. It's such a loss of talent to teach that out of children. And I know that's not supposed to be legal, but I feel like the opt-out option for schools is maybe a problem. What are your thoughts?
There's a lot there. Like I feel like I have so many ideas now. Yeah, and I think this is a state by state thing, at least at this current point. And as far as policies where it's like, students aren't allowed to speak Spanish, I feel like thankfully that's something that was way more common in the past than it is now. And I think that's probably maybe a school by school or district by district thing, or was at that point. But well, first, in terms of the Truth and Healing Commission bill, I think recommending or having one of those recommendations be that we teach native languages in school would be really cool. I think that's a really good idea that I would want to push on. And I think also just from like a Texas Ledge point of view, or even like school district, school board kind of thing, like recommending that we prioritize either native languages or ones that are more commonly spoken in immigrant communities, like French, or we looked this up. So Somali and Arabic are the most common languages spoken by the Somali community. So things like that, I think, would be really important, and would be maybe more manageable at a local level, or at least we might see results sooner there. But I think that's a great idea.
One thing you have to be careful about is the values within a tribe. For example, within our tribe, we do not teach our language to anyone that is not tribal. So that would be one thing to consider.
Something to share to your folks about, because you mentioned the school boards. Stephen is not here tonight, but some of you know this, that Stephen actually got, like he was able to get the Grand Prairie School District to acknowledge Indigenous Native American folks in their curriculum. It's something that other districts and school districts have not done in the state of Texas. It was mostly in part because there's also an Indigenous, Brian Parra from, who's part of the school board, who brought this up to them, right? So that kind of touches on the idea of like, it matters for our people to be present in those tables. Yes, we still need to ask, why is this table created? What was the reasoning behind it and who created it? But at the same time, we got to be sitting down on that too, right? And I think this shows how having him be part of that board really brought this into fruition. And now we're hoping to try to get in other school districts. And then to speak real quickly as a comment on the English that you mentioned, Kristen. The Chicano fight, right? And folks here maybe can speak more about this, but like the Chicano fight and the struggle was in part because they were not being allowed to speak their native language, in this case, Spanish, at home, right? From home into their in their classrooms. But soon the Chicanos started realizing how we needed to start embracing Nahuatl, right? In my case, in Oaxaca, which is one of the states in Mexico with the most amount of rich culture, that's still being preserved. Unfortunately, they were teaching more children English than their native languages. So it shows you the extensiveness of American imperialism, even in the language that it, extends all the way to our indigenous towns. And why would they do that? Because their parents knew that English was going to be needed because many of them were going to be immigrants. So it touches once again, right? Like the fact that many immigrants are indigenous. So a lot of things there. And I do agree that it's something that it has to be tribe by tribe almost based. But the best part about the Truth and Healing Reconciliation bill is that it acknowledges the damage caused by ICWA and by the boards. The damage caused especially to those children who were taken away from their tribes. Their hair was cut off, their language was taken away from them, and almost punished by them using it in their culture, right? So your question made us think a lot, Kristen, particularly because hey, we've never asked a tribe, hey, what would y'all do? So I think even asking them and them saying no is involving them into this process. So yeah, I welcome that. I don't know if folks have any other comments on it. And also, I want to start closing down this conversation about 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to stick my nose in this one more time. I apologize for doing this, but I cannot help it. I've been trying to bite my tongue, but at least in the United States of America or in the state of Texas, we have the Texas Education Agency, and it all boils down to voting. It boils down to who we elect to sit on from our districts in the Texas Education Agency. It has to do with who we elect as our state representatives and our state senators in the legislature. There was a time when it was illegal for us to speak Spanish in schools and we would get punished. Yes, we do. And even after that, it was a social issue. So in today's world, the reality is that we acknowledge scientifically there are surveys and studies in sociology that prove that speaking more than one language makes your brain work better. Your brain works more if you can speak and comprehend in more than one language. So why in the United States are we legislating, making it law to be dumb? We're trying to say, speak English. Okay, instead of speaking other languages in Europe, children learn 2 and 3 and 4 languages? Why are we limiting ourselves in the United States of America? It is up to us, the peoples of indigenous roots, we Chicanos, Tejanos, whoever we identify ourselves as. If we speak 2 languages, because our parents made sure that we did not forget our native languages. My first language was Spanish. I could not speak English when I went to first grade in public school, and I was born and raised in Dallas, Texas. So why are we trying to outlaw being smarter?
When I started embracing, my culture, my Hispanic culture and everything, it was almost overwhelming because for so long, again, I was taught to be this way, and that's not who I am, you know. So I can only say just embrace it, uh, dig deep to learn more, and just be proud of where you come from.
Thank you.
Folks, I'm gonna go ahead and just close because of the time, but feel free to stay here a bit longer if we want to continue chatting. Just wanted to kind of like officially wrap it up. I did want to plug in 2 things, if that is okay, briefly. The first one is, thank you so much, Dr. Ana Perez, and we will be searching for more speakers in the upcoming future. So we do ask you folks to maybe, nominate yourself or nominate somebody in your community. Martin, who's present in this call, and if you don't mind, Martin, dropping your phone or email for folks to reach out to you directly of any speakers or themselves to nominate themselves. For next month's topic, we have healing. And I'm ready for it because I got a lot to heal, but I also got a lot to learn from y'all. Thank you so much for making this space what it is, if we continue showing up and support for this organization, because as y'all know, it takes a village, it takes a barrio, but we're doing it, right? And we do have a mission to get into the Democratic Convention in July. And in fact, we will be going to the territory of Dr. Ana. So we'll be able to learn a bit more of the history in person. If you're welcome, of course. And, thank you. And then another plug that I wanted to make to y'all is 3-2-1, which means March, which is the 3rd month, 2nd day. I need you, 1. I see what I did there. If you can, to join us for the powwow in UTA. Now, I made a mistake of saying that we had the largest one in Texas, and I was mistaken. We had the 2nd largest. The first one is not too far from us in Cleburne, and it's hosted by the Indigenous College of Native Americans, I believe. One of their professors actually went to UTA, and she shared, which I'm gonna put the photo on the Facebook later. She brought in 1/3 of her collection of seeds. It was over 120, 1/3, y'all. And it was amazing because I counted more than 20 styles of beans, kinds of beans, and that made me very happy. That made me very proud. I wanted to share that here too. That our people are, seed collectors, but also in a way, we kind of take our history with us everywhere we go. I love the advice that, Raul brought up too, to embrace it. So embracing all of you, I'm gonna go ahead and just close this out for the evening. We're gonna continue having the conversation. And I would love to open it for anyone. Often my mentor says, like, any burning things or something you want to share, right? Or any gratitude that you want to share. Here's a moment.
I've gone ahead and put